Todd Madison, items A, B, and C.
All right, imagine that. Thank you. So here we are again. We want to discuss the minutes. I want to say once again what an awesome job Ann does of preparing the minutes. It's great to be able to read that recap. I missed the last meeting, so it's kind of nice to be able to see what happens. Of course, I'm just really filling in time here because I can't do presentations like union members can, because we're not important as parents. But thanks again on the classified personnel on item B. Thanks again to Todd and Jolie for answering the questions I brought up in the last general consent item thing. It's great to know what the differences are and the discrepancies between the Personnel Commission report and the numbers reported in the personnel orders month to month. So it's handy to see that and know that there's a reason behind it. I see classified staff is now up to 155 new hires this year. That's, as always, great job. We see voluntary turnover rate continues to be low, 11.9% for this year. That's about 3/4 the rate we see in comparable private industry. So OUSD is still doing something right, I should say there. They continue to enjoy working here, apparently, which is a good thing. Aren't leaving in excessive numbers. We don't see a lot of resignations or retirements. Certificated on item C, more good news there. We've only had 54 resignations and 32 retirements so far this year. Voluntary turnover rate, 6.35%, which is about 3 times lower than the education industry average. So again, good news. Good job for everybody in management at OUSD there. So combine that with the number of applicants per opening we've seen in the Personnel Commission report. Even though our numbers this year may be high for us, they don't represent anything any other business or industry would consider a crisis. We don't seem to have a big problem with attraction or retention. So thank you again. Way to go.
Emily Wichman, items EE and KK.
Yes, this is the early education self-evaluation plan from the state of California. And this is a plan for 3 and 4-year-olds who qualify for services based on the income of their families. The state of California requires the Board of Education receive a report to the preschool program annually, and this is it. This year, Oceanside District preschool program has focused on improving the instructional program, inclusive practices as part of the preschool program, and foster the growth of both students with disabilities and typical students, and also GATE students, I would like to ask. I'd like to thank Amarette Reed for meeting all the requirements for this self-evaluation plan from the state of California. In the plan, it mentions that meetings were held with the board to review program evaluation process. It also mentions a summary of process and findings were presented to the board and gathered input from the board. But the board did not meet with staff to develop a written list of tasks needed to modify the program in order to address all areas that needed improvement. My question is, probably to the board president, as you're the spokesperson, do you remember getting a summary of the findings? I can't see you too well, so yes or no? I got 1 minute and 35 seconds.
You get to address us.
I'm sorry?
You get to address us, Emily.
I did. I'm asking a question. I'm asking, do you remember, because this is on the board agenda, and you had answered me last time, so I thought you'd answer me again. Do you remember getting a summary of the findings? And this is something that's a general comment, a general consent, so you should have read it and looked at it. And all I'm asking is, do you remember getting a summary of the findings?
Would you like to share?
I'm sorry. Are you talking to me or just them?
I'm not talking to you.
I know I'm looking at Raquel, but I can't hear.
I'm talking to Mercedes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to speak with Mercedes at this time.
Yes, this is the summary of findings that we're presenting to you tonight on the consent, and that was posted on Friday as per the law.
So the board saw that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so will next year's report include your list of tasks needed to address all areas that need improvement, since you didn't do that this year?
Is there any other questions, Emily, that you have at this? Because
Yeah,
you're going to run out,
this
I
is-
don't want you to run out of time before you get done saying what you need
No,
to say.
I'm just waiting for it to say yes or no.
I'm not doing this.
Okay, thank you.
Graham Fraser, items F, K, M, X, double A, double H, and WP. You have 3 minutes to speak on all of those, Mr. Fraser.
Good evening, board members. I had an interesting morning reviewing some of the details in the agenda with respect to the warrant list. And so I may jump around. I've taken note of several, but I'll start off with 4X, which is the direct pay vouchers. And that was a bit of a mystery to me in terms of transparency and accounting methods. It's a long list, 3 or 4 pages, hundreds of particular items. And I'm wondering about the accounting, the way accounting's done at the school district. Like, I'm used to things like having proper prior authority and all that sort of thing. Sign off. Now, not on all of them. Some of these are things like hotel rooms. One particular one here on the 27th of May, there was 31 people from the district were out of town at something, at museums or something like that. And I thought that was a lot of people. If you could have 31 people off for the day, maybe you don't need everybody. You know, why would you need so many people off on that one day? And that costs a lot of money. A lot of these things were, let me see. What I found interesting was that there was absolutely no backup for any of this. There's some claims here for all sorts of things. Let me see. Excuse me for jumping around a bit. It's almost like people could go out and spend money on their own money, I assume, because then they could come back to the district and present the receipt for it and they get paid. It seemed to me that's fine in certain circumstances, but it seems that it's being overly taken advantage of quite a bit. And like, it's almost like, you know, here's my expense. There's expenses here for things that I couldn't, you know, $1,500 for hotel rooms and things like that. There's even one here which I thought was rather interesting. There was another one for, on the 28th, the Robert and Sharon Sargent for $2,676, reimbursement to city error. Why would that be a city error? I mean, I didn't understand that. Then there was $1,940 for Padre tickets.
Graham, thank you. Your
Okay.
time is up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've just gotten through 4X.
I'm sorry, but you only have 3
Yeah.
minutes for all comments, because it's
Oh,
all
I got 3
one.
minutes for the other whole bunch.
No,
Can I
sir.
go back and sign up
Sorry.
for them?
It's all, because it's a consent item, so everything is put together into one section.
Well, I'm going to say this, sorry.
Next
Ann?
speaker, Rose Higuera.
Next speaker, let's start.
Rose? General
consent.
consent, and you circled M and LL.
M and LL. Okay, for LL, it's the approval of professional service agreement with Palomar Family Counseling Centers. I noticed that there are like 3 agenda items for counseling. And I'm just really concerned that we're always taking the focus off the children's learning and education, and we're not doctors, we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists, and we're veering into a lot of different things that do not have anything to do with educating our kids. The grades are really, really bad, they're dismal, and I would love it if we could focus on bringing the grades up. That's all for that item.
You have 2 minutes and 33 seconds to speak on item M.
Okay, and 4M is, I'm just wondering why we're paying almost $1 million to secure Fagan, Friedman, and Fullfrost, who are attorneys, in the event that you possibly might need legal assistance. It seems like a lot of money to take away from the kids, $1 million. I'm just wondering why you don't pay for the services once you need them rather than a flat fee. Are you able to answer that, or?
Is that all you want to comment on, is that? And then
Yes.
we'll
Yeah,
decide
I was
if we
just
wanna
wondering
answer or
why
not.
it seems
We'll
like a lot of money, $1 million, yeah.
We hear you.
This is a public comment time,
Mhm.
so this is where you would just basically address this and say your comment about whatever the issues are that you have about these consent items. So any of these consent items, because we do bulk it together, it gives you that amount of time to be able to speak on those items.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just, where's the accountability to the community members and parents? You guys do have the right to answer us and respond, and it's just a honest question of accountability. So I'm just wondering why you pay up front almost $1 million for the legal services rather than pay as you need them. Or do you need $1 million worth of legal help every school year? Because that seems like a lot of money and a lot of legal help that the school would need. All right, well, thank you for your silence.
Patrick Higuera, item K.
You guys gotta respond to that, like some of these, like, and I'll ask you or something, if we wanna ask.
One quick thing, if I could just have you speak your name again, restate your name when you come up to the podium, restate your name and where your students go to school currently in our district. Thank you.
You said K, right? Okay, I wasn't sure if you said K. So I just had a question about the 4K. So you guys have looks like 20 or maybe about 15 cars that you're gonna give to auction and stuff. It says that you're going to either donate. It's recommended that the Board of Education approves Resolution 44. And then you go down a little bit more on the analysis. It says Transportation Department staff reviewed the condition estimates, value of the items listed in the attached documents, approved. This resolution notes that the Board of Education agrees with the staff estimate value and authorizes staff to proceed with a private sale or donation or disposal of the items. So the value of the 15 cars is about $1,052, which isn't a whole lot. But it says staff to proceed with a private sale. Do you know if the public's going to be aware of that public sale, where it's going to be at? I don't know if you guys are going to announce that on your website or something. Can the public or the parents make a donation recommendation on where to donate them? Is that a possibility? It also says that you have some Craftsman Mac toolboxes that I know there's some young techs that are coming up in the industry, and the automotive industry is something that we're really lagging, trying to find technicians to turn wrenches, because kids these days just don't want to turn wrenches. But the Mac toolboxes would be a great start for them, because those things can range anywhere from about $1,000 to $5,000. So do you guys know is it going to be a public knowledge? Does anyone know? Does anyone have any ideas? Or is it going to be on the website?
Just finish up, Patrick, with your comments?
I
and then we'll
am,
respond?
that's pretty much
That
it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just waiting, I'm just waiting for an answer, that's all.
We don't answer questions during this time?
Oh, no questions are being answered? Oh, okay.
No,
So,
sir.
but you wrote down the notes, so you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, all right, just want to be sure that you did that, all right. Okay, well, here's a couple of suggestions. This is the old CAP school. There, it's actually, it's a Miramar College. Do you want this information? Can I hand it to somebody? Maybe you can donate it there and give it to you, okay? And then here's another one, veterancardonations.com.
Thank you.
Who should I
Thank
ask
you.
about? Hey, should I ask about?
That's it for general consent items.
Okay,
Madam
thank you.
Chair, Before,
sir.
before you vote, I would just like to clarify a couple things here for us all. When we're on these consent items, when you address us with these questions, those are good questions, and we appreciate it. A lot of them could be answered, you know, maybe yesterday or today morning with staff, easier than up here, like one around the documentation of all the warrant lists, for example, that Graham raised. There's reams of warrant lists and requests to go places and come back and show the documentations and get reimbursed. So we have all that stuff. It's just not in this list that you see here as a formal document that we have to approve by the state of California. It requires us to put this on an agenda. You don't see that at the city council, by the way, because they don't have that rule. But the same process goes through there as we do here. Staff requests things and they get approved or not, and they go do it and they spend the money and they get reimbursed. And we have lots of documentation, and it's all straight up and very honest. You could question the purpose for them, but the legitimacy of them is pretty tight, I would say. But when you raise those questions, it's up to the staff here and the board, the board or staff to decide to respond or not after you've raised us the question on a consent item. It's not like it's a regular public hearing. So, for example, on Rose's question there about the legal issues, I'd ask the superintendent to give us a 1-second response or a couple-minute response as to why we feel it's a better deal to go with a flat fee with Fagan versus the hourly that we were paying previously that was creeping up beyond $1 million potentially several years ago. If the superintendent could just give a rationale for that.
That's exactly the response.
Yeah.
Instead of paying the hourly, we pay a flat fee, and we analyze it every year if we're to the good or not to the good, and we're to the good.
Cool. And related to Patrick's concerns on the
Can we call
surplus
for the
items.
question, please?
No, I'm asking a question for clarification of these items.
Well, this is
I'm
not
asking
the
staff to
time.
clarify, I'm asking staff to clarify the information, the questions that were asked. It's not prohibitive for us to ask that question.
I understand that.
Thank you. So what I would ask staff to explain the procedure for the surplus of that item, was it M or LC, or item K for the surplus vehicles and that are going to be disposed of?
Thank you, Mr. Blessing. We do try to recycle, but in terms of the question about the public auction, we do have a public auction site that we put them on, and anyone is available to bid on them. And then we sell them. If we can't sell them, then we do try to donate. If you have recommendations on places to donate it to, that would be terrific. And then we do try to salvage any of the metal we can, and then we take that money back for the general fund. But typically when things are being disposed of, they're in pretty bad shape. So for example, the toolboxes absolutely can be really valuable. These ones are in pretty bad shape. But we have to go through what Ed Code clarifies for us as the steps, where we do have to try to sell it, donate it before we ever dispose of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That clarifies the questions that I wanted to clarify for those that were raised, and so I would move approval of the consent calendar.
Second. We have a first and a second. Call for the
First person will be Todd Madison.
All right, thank you very much. So the LCAP is supposed to be a plan for spending to improve education, and we need it. As we all know, Oceanside is failing kind of miserably. Page 10 of the LCAP summarizes that. In spring 2022, 41.19% of students assessed met or exceeded standard for ELA, 28.73 met or exceeded standard for math on SBAC. Both math and ELA are at a low performance level. Put it another way, it's more meaningful to parents perhaps. 59% of our kids don't meet minimal standards for English, and a whopping 71% don't meet standards for math. By any standard, OUSD gets an F in educating kids. iReady looks better, but iReady is not the dashboard. We can only hope that'll be reflected. So what are we going to actually do beyond hope to fix that? Perhaps board members have a different standard for acceptable performance, but to me, and I think to most parents, we're not just doing poorly. This is a crisis. It demands action now, not later. The LCAP is supposed to be our plan to take those actions. Also on page 10, we see it says OUSD staff is working to address those identified areas of need through targeted professional development, a focus on curriculum and instructional materials, interventions, extended support opportunities. If that sounds familiar, it's virtually the same plan outlined on page 22 of last year's LCAP. Page 41 tells us we're just going to continue with that same plan, as we saw just recently in the presentation. No changes have been made to the planned goals, desired outcomes, or actions, is the quote. Are we really going to say what we've been doing has worked so well that we're just going to do more of the same as a proposed solution when it clearly isn't working? You may all be familiar with an often quoted saying attributed to Albert Einstein. He supposedly said that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is, can anyone tell me? Insanity. Yes. So now I would not want to call the OSD administration or board insane, but there's another saying that relates to this, something from my home state of Minnesota, where waterfowl are common. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Yes, makes no difference whether it's a mallard or a merganser. It's not like there are no possible ways to improve education here. There are a number of districts in our state with somewhat equivalent demographics, district size, mix of kids, comparable economics, etc. Many of them do better. Why are we not looking at what they do and doing that instead of simply doing what has already failed? Could it be because improving education might cost money, money that would reduce funds available for the employees of OUSD to improve their bank accounts instead, which is what we've seen the priorities are here? I hope we can do that. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Michael Richardson.
Insanity, right? You know, on page 6 of the LCAP draft, you reiterate your values and your vision, mission, instructional focus, and values. The values says, students first. Our students are our highest priority. What's best for students guides our decision-making every day. Who believes that? Do any of you believe that? You claim to be making progress, but your claim of progress is so disingenuous. For example, on the iReady test, in the spring of 2022, 25% of the students were above grade level in reading. 2022, 27%. So going from 25 to 27 is progress? I wouldn't call it progress. I think you need to rethink this. It's a bunch of insanity.
Next speaker, Patty Kay.
You're a little bit in luck today because from home to here I lost my notes. So anyway, I do remember, however, that Dr. Norman, I did contact the office 2 days ago for sure, and asking by email and message, for a copy of your presentation. I hadn't yet gotten a call back or any kind of response, which is a little disappointing. Just a notification that it wasn't ready or something would be good. Okay, and in the presentation, on the agenda, they're on 115 pages. It was a little hard to digest totally. However, I did notice just today on page 10 or 11, buried in 115 pages, was the public hearing. This is a public hearing to solicit recommendations from the public and partners regarding proposed actions and expenditures. I don't really see too many parents here or public. Were the parents notified by email or individually? Because I think this would have been the time to do input, but that box is checked. So I think that since it's kind of buried and it didn't really advertise as a public hearing, maybe we can extend that and get some more input. I would appreciate it. Anyway, the bottom line is, I don't know about the iReady, but we are familiar with the Smarter Balance assessments, and it goes along with what you had in your reports. And those reports do say that 71% failure for math in the 21-22 reports, and the 59% failure in ELA in the reports. So we've been hearing this for a couple years, and we've been, reminding about the achievement scores or lack of them. So the elephant in the room here for the past 2 years and going forward are the low achievement scores, and what are we going to do about them? That's all we want to know. And I really think that some input onto the recommendations might be handy. As I probably said, we sat in a classroom of 45 to 50 back in the day. And I think it was the expectation that we sit there, listen, and achieve. And with all the different diverse organizations that you have within the district, it seems almost splintered. So let's get back to basics. Thank you.
Emily Wichman.
Okay, on page 8, I was not able to read through 115 pages quite yet. We only get this around 4 or 5 o'clock on Friday, and then by Monday we're supposed to give you questions and we're supposed to have them answered, and so it is difficult, but I thank you, Mike, for answering some of our questions. On page 8, it mentions Panorama surveys. Now, Panorama was implemented district-wide in 2021 to assess the student social-emotional competencies, student social-emotional supports, environment. For $105,000, we learned that only the 3rd to 5th graders were at or above 80% in growth mindset, whatever that is, teacher-student relationships, and a sense of belonging. That's great news for our 3rd to 5th graders. What about the rest of the grades? And what about the students? I was hoping I would see something like this on the presentation, because on public comment, on general consent, you just voted to pay $375,750 for another contract with Palomar without, again, because it wasn't general consent. We didn't see any data. It wasn't transparent. And I know the district's mantra is transparency. So I would like to see that in action and not just in words. And part of this social emotional learning, again, it mentions on the contract there's all kinds of surveys, there's all kinds of data, there's all kinds of good stuff. So where is that? I think maybe that with Mike's suggestion that we will get together with you ahead of time so that we can look at this. Of course, it's going to be after the fact because we don't see the presentations to ask you questions about it. Otherwise, I think we would have more questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're done for that item. We do have 2 public comments from Todd Madison and Graham Frazier.
All right, well, thanks again. So now we get to review the plan, which I assume will be approved in the next meeting, even though there's no actual real plan for improvement of academics in there. In reviewing it, I noticed, as we have pretty much every year since I left the LCAP process, the LCAP survey was once again designed to avoid generating quantifiable data that could be used to guide spending in ways that reflect stakeholder input. As you all know, the LCAP's point was to gather that data to prioritize how education funding is used. Simply asking parents, how would you like to see your money spent, is not a part of the survey. Such direct prioritization questions would result quantifiable results, so they haven't been part of the survey since I left the process in 2018. Now why? Because if we said, as we found then, that the majority of parents want reduced class sizes, and the district ignored that to spend more money on their own paychecks, it would be much more obvious. Better to have plausible deniability, I think. You all know the numbers. In 2021, the median total compensation of a full-time OUSD administrator was $167,000. For certificated employees, make that $127K. With a 5% raise last year, we're likely talking about $175K to $133K respectively. So what if, instead of using our money to give employees bonus raises, we had decided to do something different this time around? What if we spent on things that might actually result in improved academic performance for our kids? How about smaller class sizes? Not just by 1 or 2. I agree with Nancy on this. The academic impact of that is not clear, but with increasing disruptions in classrooms, it seems likely giving teachers less kids to keep track of would benefit everyone. If we put the $9 million we spent on bonus raises into class size reductions, we could easily cut class sizes by several kids per class. If we had started doing that back when I started suggesting it, we'd be looking at 20 kids or less per class right now, but we didn't do that. So why haven't we done that? Why doesn't the current LCAP start doing that right now? What about higher pay for starting teachers? We talk about wanting to attract the best teachers. I agree that should be done. Why not do it? For a fraction of the $9 million we gave in bonus raises, we could revise the salary schedule to increase starting teacher pay by thousands of dollars per year. Why not do that? What about classroom discretionary funds for teachers? Likely just the raise money given to administrators would provide every teacher several $100s a year to spend on classroom supplies so they don't have to take it out of their pocket. Seems like a good idea to me. But no, we're not going to do any of that. We're going to say we want to do those things, but not actually do them. What we're going to do is the same thing we've always done, which doesn't appear to work. What is it that Einstein called that again? Insanity. What do we call the animal that waddles and quacks? Thank you very much.
Again, I'm Graham Fraser. I don't have much to say because Todd just said it all. He must have taken what I was going to say and just copied it. So, Todd, I just, you again upstaged me. So, but I'm happy that that happened. I'm just mystified. I'm not an educator like you folks and Todd get into the intricacies of the finances here, but I did take a look at the rather complex chart in the documents, and I saw that next year I compared last year's total revenue of $347 million to the projected revenue is $277 million. I don't, the math's not, there's $70 or $80 million difference coming up. So I was just wondering how that's going to be handled. I did see the next, that was item A, the revenues are down, coming down. The item next B was, item B was the salaries of the various classified people, certified services, well, I can't, my eyes are not that good. So anyway, I see they're down 1 or 2%, and I assume that's because, I don't know why that's down. Is it because there's less teachers? Because there's less kids? You're not getting so much money from the state? Because of all the absenteeism? I don't understand why there's so much absenteeism. I mean, why don't the kids want to come to school? What kids don't want to learn? Most kids naturally want to learn. Anyway, I see there's not that much change to the higher level salaries. And yet, as you go down the list, books and supplies, minus 80%, Services and other operating expenses, 45, all down, down, down. So at the end of the day, there's a 22% reduction in total expenditures. So I don't get it. And what is the plans to make next year work without going bankrupt? And I hope we're going to, I know this is a preliminary budget, so I'm looking to see those answers in the final budget. I don't know when that's going to be. Is that next meeting, the final budget? Is there an answer for that? When's the final budget
This is
coming
a
out?
different item. He's looking at the budget.
We're talking about LCAP currently.
Okay, I'm talking about the budget.
Yes, sir.
That's
Okay.
the next hearing.
Okay, thank you. Just put all that for the next budget.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to item C.
Todd Madison, item 8A.
Madam Chair, A and B, like, considered together, or people submit separate?
We don't have
They
any
submitted
speakers on
separate.
8B.
We had to agendize them separately.
They're on our.
It's like the same item.
state law.
All right, so here's our budget for the coming year. Got to admit, even as a hobbyist that's more into these things than most, I have no clue what the budget is saying. I'm glad Ms. Norman here knows what she's doing here. I have no idea. This year we had massive revenue. Despite that record revenue, this year we're running a deficit of almost $6 million. It's great to hear Eleanor's concern about the deficit, but maybe a little bit late. And as we've seen, the deficit gets worse. So what part of that is good financial management? Is what I'm wondering. Now we see a huge revenue drop expected next year. Incredible one-time funding from the feds and the state are going away, exacerbated by expected declines in enrollment. We knew this was coming. It was not only predictable, but it was predicted. Many, many warnings were given that now is not the time to add permanent costs to the budget because of the damage it would do with lower revenue expected in the future. But of course, we ignored that because holding back on those increases would not have benefited the bank accounts of those who stand to gain. Classic self-serving human nature, exactly what a responsible board is there to stand up against on behalf of our kids. But our board doesn't do that, do they? They don't stand up for kids, they stand up for employees. And employees, being human beings they are, tend to think more for themselves as the best possible use of money, as always. Despite the fact that there's never been a direct correlation between more money for adults and improved academic performance. No study ever says that. So according to the state's numbers, in the last decade, OUSD's funding has gone from $8,810 per ADA in 2012 to $17,994 in 2022. It's an increased rate of 7.4% per year, which is almost 3 times the rate of inflation. But yet academic performance has remained flat or declined. Most of that's gone into the paychecks of adults, which shows obviously more money for adults does nothing, as I said earlier. Everyone involved last fall knew full well the damage increasing those costs would do to future budgets. Everyone knew they would ultimately require cuts to be made. It looks like we've got a few years now from all that inflow, but it's going to happen eventually. We see a $9 million deficit in a few years here. The County Office of Ed clearly pointed that out at the time, saying in the response that deficit spending will increase, but the board approved it 5-0, as they always do, and we now see that in the multi-year. As I've said, taking candies from babies for themselves just because they can. This won't be the last time I get to quote Joe Biden. Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. We see the budget, we know what you value, and it isn't a better education for our kids. Thank you.
Just a reminder that when you do come up for public comment, we ask that, again, you would restate your name and where your child goes to school in our district. Thank you.
And they'll have 2 minutes.
We are also, you have 2 minutes to speak at this time.
Our first 3 speakers will be Sonia Robinson, Todd Madison, and Lisa Farrell. Sonia Robinson. Todd Madison.
right, 2 minutes is going to be a challenge. So I recently saw a video in which our superintendent, Dr. Vitale, was interviewed in a show called Voice for Equity. The interview provided some insight regarding some of the problems parents are having with the district. I appreciate Dr. Vitale's advocacy for tolerance. I'm 100% with her on that. LGBTQ people face difficulties in society every day. We need to fight that. Unfortunately, though, she quickly goes off the rails and we see enough straw men to create a California wildfire, or maybe a Canadian wildfire. She talks about personal attacks. You can see the video of all the comments that have been said on the Facebook Parent Association page, San Diego Schools YouTube, if you'd like. Truly personal attacks, I think, are very rare. Unlike personal attacks on parents, which happen every day when parents are forced to send their kids into a school system that insists on promoting beliefs that have nothing to do with academics. We don't have true school choice, so we have no option. Dr. Vitale dismisses parents' assurance. It's not about the LGBTQ part by saying, well, what is it about then? I'm not sure if she's been at these meetings, because if you go to tape, you'll find abundant cases where speakers start off saying they have no issues with people who want to be being who they want to be, none at all. Speakers have been clear they feel the problem is the focus by the district not to just teach tolerance of other viewpoints and lifestyles, which is good, but in promoting those viewpoints and lifestyles, which many feel is not appropriate for our schools. She says, I've never once talked about what I do in the privacy of my home. That's great. We appreciate that. It's how it should be. Why then do we have books in our libraries offering graphic illustrations and descriptions of what others do in the privacy of their homes? Parents aren't expressing hate of LGBTQ people. They're protesting the teaching, or protesting the teaching of tolerance. Finally, we say there's no other possible reason for parents' opposition. The district is doing very well. I think if you look at what we've seen in this meeting, you can tell the district is not doing very well. I think that alone should have our board looking for perhaps another superintendent.
Thank you, Todd.
Yep, thank you.
Lisa Farrell.
Good evening, school board members and Superintendent Vitale. My name is Lisa Farrell. I've been a teacher in our school district for 22 years, and this has been an extremely difficult and exhausting year. As a teacher, I've felt the lack of support this year. We've been without a counselor for weeks, a night custodian for months, and we've had an unfilled duty supervisor position all year. Every person on campus has had a turn chasing one of our TK students. Every staff member without a classroom has taken a turn supervising the playground. We've already have large classes, huge caseloads, and more work than can possibly be done in 24 hours a day, and we could not have made it through this year without the amazing support of our principal and AP. We're tired, we're stretched thin, and our school only has an enrollment of 500. I say this to make you aware of what's happening at our schools and what's being put on the shoulders of our teachers and admin every day. As frustrated as I am about the situation at my site, I'm actually here to talk to you as a parent in our district. I want better for my son. He goes to Reynolds for 2 more days. Next year, he'll follow the bilingual program to FUSAT. Tonight, you voted to add portables to FUSAT. They'll add 250-ish students to their campus and 13 more classrooms. What isn't being added is extra administrators, extra counselors, extra custodial staff, extra office staff, all the people it takes to support the learning of our students. I believed you when you said Reynolds needed to be closed because of safety, and I understood when you said you were waiting until the end of the year to do this transition the right way. Cramming more students into a school without the proper support is not the right way. Having 2 principals sounded good. Now it seems like a small token to keep the peace. They need an assistant principal. Having the same amount of custodial support for 500 students as almost 800 students is not the right way. A school counselor will have 13 more classroom lessons to teach each month and 250 more students to support. That's not the right way to only have 1 counselor. FUSAT students need an assistant principal. FUSAT students need additional custodians. FUSAT students need you to be proactive and provide the needed support to make the transition successful. My son needs you to do this the right way. Thank you.
Next 3 speakers, Patty Kay, Beth Barnum, and Rose Higuera.
This is an interview that is well worth listening to. It's not directed at anyone personally. It's an overview of the status of government schools in California by a child psychiatrist.
System is not only a failure, it is irredeemable. The school system is controlled, utterly controlled, by teachers' unions and advocates, meaning those who go into the schools to proselytize their political ideology on your children. They have no other purpose, no other function, and they have taken over entirely. We would be better off if all Americans pulled their kids out of the government schools and either did homeschooling or built their own schools in their local communities. That would cause the corrupt, rotten, termite-infested structure to finally collapse on its own weight, and then we could rebuild on a local level from the ground up. I can hardly believe
Ryan, can we stop the clock?
The problem here is that because this is a public comment for you to come and make your public comment, not to, because it's almost like the point of giving the minutes to
saying that now
someone
because
else, and
just
we're
2 or
not
3
sure.
years ago, I would have thought that that is extreme.
Beth Barn?
This is your time for public comment? And for, this time is given to you to come to the board and share your public comment. No, ma'am. Thank you.
Beth Barnum?
Exactly why we're pulling kids out of school. Once again, I'm going to tell parents how, this is for parents, this is not for the board because the board doesn't ever listen. I homeschool my son. I pulled him out 3 years ago. I am an Oceanside resident and I am ashamed of what happens to Oceanside School District. What needs to happen is actually everyone to pull out and you become bankrupt. There are great teachers out there. Unfortunately, they don't have a voice. So the way you pull your child out of school is make sure you always have a paper trail. Always. You email your school, you tell your school that you are pulling your child out of school, print that email, print the response, and file it in your homeschool file. Next, go and file your private school affidavit. It's called a PSA. Go to cde.ca.gov, search for private school affidavit, scroll down to filing the affidavit. Click on private school affidavit, fill out the information, make sure you do not name your school after your name or your address. Should take about 5 minutes. Print that form, file it with your homeschool paperwork. Always keep a paper trail. Next, go to hslda.org. This is the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. The cost is $150 a year. Once you enroll, they become your lawyer. So anything that comes up legally, such as the sheriff knocking on your door because your child is truant, or your school district saying that your child is truant, you don't answer the door, you call HSLDA, and they are your lawyer. If you have trouble getting your child into college because you have a homeschool child, again, HSLDA will talk about that. They will take care of your problem. How much does it cost to homeschool your child? It can be nothing. It could be $500 a year. It could be $1,000 a year. A couple more websites. Homeschoolcollective.co is here in North County. Publicschoolexit.com. Willow Ridge Academy. Freedomofchoicehomeschool.com is right down the street. You do not have to be a teacher to teach your kids. You have the best interest, not this board.
Thank
as
you.
just shown. I cannot believe you guys just did that.
Rose Figuera?
So in honor of June, LGBTQIA, L is for love, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him would not perish, but would have everlasting life. G is for good. He is a good, good father. B is for beautiful. He made each one of us beautiful just the way we are. T, there is time. You have time to turn to God today. Today is a day of salvation. Tomorrow might be too late. Q, questions. Bring them to God. He has all the answers. I, he is the I am. God says he's the great I am. A, ask God to reveal himself to you. He loves you. And Revelations 4:3, it says, the one sitting there was as beautiful as precious stones, like jasper and cornelian. All around the throne was a rainbow with clear colors like an emerald. So I noticed that the school board raised the rainbow flag at the school district. I think there should only be one flag. There shouldn't be any pride flags in any classrooms or any talk of this. Kids should be able to retain their innocence and focus on learning and just being innocent kids. So just a reminder that the rainbow is God's. It does represent his throne. And yes, since we've been coming to the school for 2 years, we've been trying to get the pornographic books out of the school libraries to no avail. That shows us that you guys aren't interested in helping the kids, but rather harming the kids, because there's no reason for perversion and all these different sexual things to be taught in schools. Kids should just be able to have a good and fair, excellent education so they can compete in society. And so it's just really sad because my kids, they all went to these schools and they actually did get a great education. I was very grateful for the teachers and worked alongside them. But now it's very political size. So pull your kids out of school.
Thank you, Rose.
Next three speakers, Michael Richardson, Patrick Higuera, and Ernesto Polanco.
Mike. After the last board meeting, you came up to me and said, we just disagree. You remember that? Yeah. I want to ask you, what is it we disagree about? Is it the fact that 59% of the district students are failing in reading? Do you disagree that that's a problem? Is it the fact that 71% of the district students are failing in math? Do we disagree that that's a concern? Is it the fact that the district had a 38.4% chronic absenteeism? Do we disagree that this is a problem? Is it the fact that under your watch, the district spent over $6 million more than they received this year? If you were managing a business, you'd be fired. Is it the fact that you employ an overpaid superintendent who puts her focus on her political and ideological agenda ahead of the kids? I've been coming to these meetings for over 2 years, and I rarely hear discussion about teaching the kids. It's all about DEI. That's discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. Let me repeat, discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. That's what your job is. Discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. I've never heard any discussion. According to the district website, by establishing and implementing policy, the board is dedicated to ensuring the success of every student in the district through clear, concise direction to the superintendent. Do you think you do? Do you think you do this?
Richardson. Thank you.
Do you think you do this?
Thank you.
Gotta go fast, gotta go fast. So your report card for 2022, 2023, I gotta cut it down. Math proficiency for a high school, 26%. Reading, 50%. High school readiness for college, 32%. Graduation rate, you were right there, big guy. Last year it was about 85%. Now it's 65.8. This is according to usnews.org. This board has condemned and closed at least 3 schools within the last 3 years. They don't allow for overhead presentation for parents even by request. They allow for pornographic books to be in the libraries, thanks to you. They continue to sexualize our kids without parent consent. I've been coming here for 2 years just like the rest of them with, you guys aren't helping at all. And it's always going to be 5-0, right, Mike? That's what you told us about a few months back. I believe we are all Americans, at least I hope we are, and we want our kids to prosper. But this is what the logo looked like, our OUSD logo, that's what it looked like. And then for this month, it looks like this. And that's all because of you, Vitaly. Let me give you a number, okay? What's 416,800? That's the military men who died in World War II. 1,465 killed at Normandy, 1,928 missing. So we had 16, 17-year-old men lying to get in the Army. Now look at the men we have now. It's a shame. LGBT, you give them 30 days of celebration and a flag. What do you give the fallen soldiers? 1 day in May. 1 day in May. How come you didn't turn the logo into the American flag? Why didn't you do that? How come none of you stood up for this? You all should be ashamed of yourselves. You're not Americans. You're not Americans at all. You're a bunch of fools.
Never believed I was going to be in front of you guys after all these years. My name is Ernesto Gonzalez Polanco. I'm a proud pirate, class of 91.
Go Pirates!
All side. I'm a product of Oceanside Unified School District. I'm a true example of a multilingual learner. And now in front of you, I've been working for the district for 30 plus years. It's a pleasure. It's been an honor. I've been more than happy with my son graduating from Oceanside High School in 2013, and many of my family members as well. Now I'm in front of you today because I'm grateful that now we had a group of a committee reviewing or classify a position for a school community advisor, and I'm happy that they're reviewing all the other duties and job descriptions. In front of you, you have a description of all my duties. I'm only here representing myself, and those that are going through the same scenarios. My job description, we were asked to do a survey, and that described all my duties that I had done. Unfortunately, since the time that I've been in a school community advisor, my range is only a 16. After 30 years, I'm already ranged the step 22. So I pledge for you guys to please review or range at the high school level, as the job description have been divided into 2 for elementary, for school community advisors. My role at the high school level, there's actually 3 of us at the high school level, but elementary and middle school have lower, they're not the job descriptions, it's not the same. We do a lot more at the high school level, and I appreciate this committee to be able to please review this time to see how that can be divided between asking for school community advisors being hired right now as step 1.
Thank you, Mr. Polanco. I'm sorry.
It took me 10 years to get to 30 years to get to 32, but I appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
Next 3 speakers, Ann Frazier, Emily Wichman, and Susan Custer.
is it? It's pasteurized milk. No one's going to smile. It's kind of sick, isn't it? But I had to make it legal. I'm going to take the rest of my time to sit because you don't listen to me. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to pray silently. Silence is golden. Takes a long time for 2 minutes to pass. Okay.
Thank you.
You don't say, my name is Mrs. Fraser.
Thank you.
My name is Emily Witchman. My children and grandchildren went to Palmquest, Lincoln, Chavez, or MLK, Garrison, and El Camino. Mike had a good idea, and I'll go, and I'm going to run with that. It takes a couple of days to get some questions answered from the agenda. So what I'll do on Tuesdays in the evenings, I will ask you those questions and then meet a couple of days later for your answers. And this way, we won't hang you up and be looking at you and wondering, what are you going to say? So thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to address a few comments from a Dr. Vitelli interview. At one point, you were talking about the school board meetings, and you said that the people attending the school board meetings were, and this is a quote, "were not going to end your life with their hatred." You also stated that, another quote, "you have to endure attacks at the school board meetings by small-minded people." Another statement from you was that, and a quote again, the book banning conversation has reached our board meeting. I feel it's necessary to clarify a few things because apparently you misunderstood what we've been saying. I don't really care if you think I'm small-minded. However, I do not like the spreading of misinformation. We're not against the LGBT community. We're against the pornographic books that are in the libraries in the schools. We're against the books that come with a warning on the cover stating that if you're under 18, it is illegal for you to read this book. We're against these books being available to students as young as 14. We would also be against Playboy magazines, which are geared towards heterosexual men, and beer being in the schools. Why? Because it's not appropriate for children as young as 14. Today I reviewed some of the school board meetings regarding the books, and not one person said they hated the LGBT community, and it was often stated that we need to support all students. You referred to the books that the students read and spoke about at the February 7th school board meeting. You said most of the students said these books should not be removed. The book these students read were The Hate U Give and Anne Frank, the illustrated version. I've read both of these books and agree they're fine to be in a high school. Of the books that should be removed that we had mentioned, only one student read one of the books, and it was genderqueer.
Thank you.
I'd like to close with saying, let's, instead of raising the pride,
Allison Menu and Maria Alshalma.
Good evening. I was gonna speak on, I didn't get to make it on time for the ALCAP and was very disappointed to know that you guys are just continuing to do the same. It's sad. And Eleanor, your comments on we're doing so great, give me a break. I'm gonna actually, I have a little bit towards Dr. Vitale when it comes to that interview that Susan's talking about. You had mentioned about the parents at an elementary school and how you know, you didn't understand why they were so upset about the LGBTQ curriculum coming into the schools. But it just seemed like you were very dismissive as to the fact that these are very passionate Christian Armenian parents in the community that are rising up. And thank God for them, because there's gonna be more rising up. It's very sad what happened that couple days later in Glendale. Actually, they did pass it. So LA Unified, for the people at home, the board president is very open on the whole agenda to bring in curriculum, and so she got her way. No matter, there was plenty of parents there, all walks of life. Again, they're not against the LGBTQ community. They're there for their children, and their children are way too young. The children of LAUSD have been put through so much. It's heartbreaking and just very sad. So, no, we're not going to stop.
Thank you.
Good evening, board and Dr. Vitale and other folks up here this evening. My name is Maria Alshama. I'm a district social worker in Oceanside Unified School District. And I'm just going to clear up a few things that were brought up at our last school board meeting. California law, AB 1266, has been in place for 10 years. It provides many protections for transgender youth. It states that students can change their name and/or gender marker on student information systems without a legal change and without parent permission. The law also states that school staff cannot disclose a student's LGBTQ status to anyone, including parents, without student permission. California enacted this law and others to help protect this very vulnerable population. 40% of the homeless youth population in the US self-identify as part of the LGBT community. The main reason they're homeless is family rejection. In the past year, more than half of the transgender and non-binary youth in this country have considered suicide. That data hurts my heart and my soul. Over the years, I have worked very closely with lots of trans youth, and I see these scenarios played out regularly. But here's the great news. LGBTQ students who identified in a greater number of supportive school staff reported higher levels of self-esteem, lower levels of depression, and a 34% lower odds of attempting suicide in the past year. Trans students who reported having pronouns respected by all or most people in their lives attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected. We've heard that it's too hard and inconvenient for teachers to learn a new name and pronoun for a student or to not reveal that to unaccepting parents, but I know teachers are incredibly capable of doing many things during their school day. I have the utmost respect for teachers. They are my people. I also have the utmost respect for our trans and non-binary youth. They're also my people. They bring me a lot of joy. I hope that everybody here feels that it's worth it to protect this population of students. It's not only the law, but it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that is we will adjourn the meeting now at 8:47. Thank you for all being here.